Welcome back everyone, it is Eric from Rare Candy, and today we're going to be breaking down the brand new Serperior VSTAR deck that we're getting from the brand new Silver Tempest set. Now, I know Serperior hasn't had quite as much attention given to it as maybe Lugia or a couple of the other new cards in this set, but I actually do think this is probably among one of the better new Pokemon V attackers that we're getting in this set. And for this particular list, we are choosing to pair it with the new Altaria as well, an idea I saw floating around in some of the Japanese deck lists that have been winning some smaller tournaments over there. So I definitely wanted to explore this deck and see how it might wind up. So that's what we have going on today. And before we get into the actual list, just a heads up, friends of the channel over at PokeXWord.com are still running their October giveaway, giving away 100 Lost Origin codes. If you've never checked out their site before, every week they post these really cool Pokemon and Pokemon TCG themed crossword puzzles. And they even recently launched a brand new Guess That Pokemon puzzle type. And on top of that, like I mentioned, every month they give away a ton of free PTCGO codes. So if you do want to enter their giveaway, all you have to do is head on over to their Twitter and follow the instructions there on their giveaway post. I'll be sure to drop links to all this stuff today down below in the description. But with that being said, let's hop in and check out the Serperior deck. So up first, we do have 4 copies of Serperior V. Unfortunately, it's really nothing too special. I guess technically we can do 120 for a grass and 2 colorist, but really we're just here to evolve into the V-Star. But when Serperior does evolve, it does get much better. It gets an HP buff all the way up to 270, gains free retreat, which actually is pretty important for this deck, and definitely some much better attacks too. The first one for a grass and 2 colorist is 190, and then you get to move your energy attached to your Pokemon to any other Pokemon that you like, which is definitely really handy for this type of deck because we're always really just trying to attack with Serperior, move our energy to our next one, then freely retreat into that next fresh attacker and start the loop all over again. And the V-Star power here is actually pretty good as well. For a single grass energy, does 60 times the amount of energy attached to it, and then you switch it with one of your benched Pokemon. So I think ideally this is going to be like our big closer attack of the game, where we maybe attack with the first attack, move all of our energy in play to a Serperior on the bench, retreat into that, and swing for a giant KO to take the game. So it's really cool that we have that as an option just because this first attack is largely 2-hit KO oriented. 190 is a pretty decent amount. More than likely we're going to be hitting for 170 with a double turbo. So it is nice to have this big one-shot option as something we can lean on at some point in the game. But as mentioned, we do have the Altaria line in here as well as our, backup attacker of the deck. We do have 4 copies of Swablu. I don't think it matters too much which one that you do choose to play, though I'm pretty sure this is the one from Champion's Path. But from there, we have 2 copies of the brand new Altaria to go along with it. So this thing has an attack for just 2 colorless energy. You move all of the damage counters from one of your bench Pokemon to your opponent's active. So this is going to be one of the ways we can heal damage throughout the course of the game. So if we attack with Serperior, we can maybe move its double turbo energy to our bench Swablu, and then whenever it gets attacked, we can freely retreat into Altaria, heal off all that damage, and put it onto our opponent. So this is going to be so good against those different decks that are 2-hit KO oriented, like Arceus or the Reggie deck as an example. But then from there, we also have the Dragon Altaria. Its ability allows us to search our deck for a supporter and put it on top of our deck. So we actually play a good variety of supporters in this deck, especially some very turn-specific ones as well. So if we need something maybe like a Cheryl or maybe something like a Boss's Orders for the following turn, we can immediately just search that out, put it on top of our deck with this thing. And it also does have free retreat, which is pretty nice as well. From there, we have a copy of Drapion V in the deck. We definitely need some help against Mew V Max. We are a pretty sturdy deck. We do have some decent tanking options in here, but Mew is still going to be faster than us. It's going to put on more pressure, so Drapion's just going to help level the playing field a little bit in that matchup. So of course, its attack cost does get reduced for every fusion, rapid, or single strike Pokemon they have in play, but I will say in this particular list, we actually can just manually power up this attack as well, since we can move our energy from Serperior back to Drapion on our bench at some point. Now, hopefully we never have to do this, guys, but it's an option that we do have. Next up, we have Radiant Gardevoir as our Radiant Pokemon of choice. As you would probably expect, we are just trying to sort of tank with this deck, make sure we don't get one-shot. And Gardevoir is going to reduce damage to us by 20. That's going to put us out of one-shot range of things like Giratina V-Star, make us a little sturdier against Mew V Max, and even helps against the brand new Lugia V-Star as well. Up next, we have a copy of Manaphy in the deck, of course, just to protect our bench against bench damage. And for our final Pokemon, we just have a couple of bench-sitting multi-prizers. We have our Lumineon V to search a supporter out of our deck, and also a copy of Crobat V to draw until we have 6. But getting into some of the supporters I mentioned, we do have 4 copies of Professor's Research. Of course, just to discard our hand and draw 7. Best draw supporter that we have in the format. We also have a couple copies of Marnie in the deck as well, of course, just to force both players to put their hands at the bottom of their deck. We get 5, our opponent gets 4, so definitely good on those turns where we don't want to discard our hand, and also provides a little bit of disruption towards our opponent. But speaking of disruption, we also do have a copy of Roxanne in the deck as well. More for the late game, of course. Once they get past that 3 prize card threshold, we can force them to shuffle their hand into their deck and get 2, and we get 6. But next up from there, we have a brand new supporter card we're getting in Silver Tempest, and that is going to be Serena. So Serena, it's a really cool card. It has 2 different effects. The first one, you can discard up to 3 cards from your hand, though you do have to discard at least 1, and then you draw until you have 5 cards. Or you can choose to use its other effect where you switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon V with their active Pokemon. So effectively in the early game, this can be maybe a decent draw supporter to help get set up, and then in the mid to late game when you're trying to find those gusting options to take KOs, this can help you out with that as well. But even though we are playing the 2 Serena, we do also have 1 copy of Boss's Orders in the deck as well. The big issue with Serena is that it can only gust up Pokemon V. Now usually that's not an issue, those are going to be the Pokemon we want to bring up most of the time, but every now and again there are going to be 1 prize Pokemon you might want to pull up to take a knockout on. From there, we have a copy of Avery in the deck. We draw 3 and force our opponent to discard until they have 3 benched Pokemon. So good against things like Palkia, Mew, even the Reggie deck. Palkia in particular, I think is kind of a sketchy matchup for this deck, so any additional help that we can get against that is definitely going to be welcomed. Up next from there, we have a copy of Raihan in the deck. So one of the big issues that Serperior does have is that it really requires 2 manual attachments to get up and running. So for example, if our only Serperior with our energy gets knocked out, well, on the next turn, we can go Raihan, or maybe we have to Lumineon for Raihan, and then get that grass energy back, and then attach Double Turbo, and get attacking with our second Serperior. And the last supporter we have is just a single copy of Cheryl, which definitely goes perfect in a deck like this where we are trying to tank hits over and over. So as I mentioned with Serperior, the big play that you're going to be making is you attack with 1, move all your energy to your next one on the bench, and then you can use cards like Altaria or Cheryl to heal off the damage from that one that you left in the active spot. So this even seems like a card you might want to go up to a second copy of, but between the Altarias and the Cheryl, I think we have a good bit of healing options at our disposal here. For our stadium cards, we have 2 copies of Turffield Stadium in the deck, so of course we can search out grass evolution Pokemon. I think there's a world where you even might be able to cut like one of these for an evolution incense. That's something I did experiment with a little bit, but always just having counter stadiums right now in the format is definitely not bad when there are so many disruptive ones running around. But we also do have a copy of Collapse Stadium in the deck as well. So as you see, we do have a couple of bench sitting liabilities with Crobat and Lumineon, and so we probably want to get them out of the way at some point since we are trying to tank hits and deny our opponent easy KOs. So Collapse Stadium forces both players down to just a 4 Pokemon bench. So we can toss away one of these Pokemon in the process and maybe also disrupt our opponent a little bit. Again, especially if we run into something like Palkia, Reggie, or Mew, these are definitely going to be decks that really don't like seeing Collapse Stadium come down. Getting into our item cards, up first we have 4 copies of Quick Ball in the deck, as well as 4 copies of Ultra Ball. So nothing special here, just the best Pokemon search cards that we have right now in the current format. From there we have 2 copies of Big Charm in the deck, so as you guys can tell, we are, like I said, trying to tank hits, make sure we don't get KO'd, and getting that extra 30 HP buff definitely can be nice. So between Big Charm and our Radiant Gardevoir, your opponent effectively has to do 320 damage if they want to one-shot you, which might be pretty tricky for them to pull off if they aren't something like Kyurem VMAX. I've also gone back and forth on maybe making one of these a big Parasol to protect against Star Requiem, or maybe even Sableye attack, but Big Charm tends to be the more generally useful out of the 2, but again, still a card that you can keep in the back of your mind if you want to iterate on this list a little bit further. And the only other Pokemon tool we're playing is just a single copy of Air Balloon to reduce our retreat cost by 2. We do also have 1 copy of Escape Rope as our only other switching method in the deck. Of course, both players have to switch their active Pokemon. Now, we don't really need too many switching cards in this deck just because our main attacker does have free retreat, but if we do have to start with something like Radiant Gardevoir, like Drapion, etc., it might be a little bit tricky getting going, so I like the idea of having the 2 different switch cards in the deck to maybe help out with that a little bit. Up next from there, we have a copy of Energy Lotto in the deck. So we look at the top 7 cards of our deck, we pick an energy card there, put it into our hand. So you could choose to play something like Energy Search, I guess if you really wanted to, but the big upside to Energy Lotto is that we can get special energies, which is so important to pulling off the turn 2 attack with this deck. Because on turn 1, if you get down a Serperior, attach a basic grass energy, well, you only have 4 double turbos in your deck, and this kind of acts as like a 5th out to a double turbo for your second turn. From there, we have a copy of Ordinary Rod. We do have a lot of discarding effects in this deck, whether it's Serena, Research, or our Ball Search cards. There are going to be Pokemon that are going to be collateral damage along the way, so being able to get those back with Ordinary Rod is definitely handy. And then to round out our trainer cards, we also have a copy of Pal-Pad for a little bit of supporter recovery. We have a pretty big variety of supporters, a lot of which are just a single copy. So being able to get those back, especially Cheryl in particular, is really, really good, especially when we also combine this with something like the Altaria that we might have sitting on our field to be able to reuse these one-ofs whenever we need to. Getting into our energy, as you would expect, we have the 4 copies of Double Turbo Energy. Of course, they do reduce our damage by 20, which is a little bit annoying, but luckily Serperior is still going to be two-shotting pretty much anything that gets in its way. And then to round out the deck, we have 6 copies of Basic Grass Energy. So that's where I'm at right now with the Serperior VSTAR deck, but I've actually gone back and forth on a bunch of different ways to build this thing. I actually almost did this deck profile today on the Inteleon version, but I thought the Altaria that people in Japan were playing with looked pretty cool, so that's why I wanted to show off this version on the channel. But of course, guys, I want to hear your full thoughts. What do you guys think of this Serperior VSTAR deck? Are there any cards you think I should have changed? Do you think this archetype might have some competitive potential? Let me know your full thoughts down below in the comment section. But as always, guys, if you did enjoy today's content, remember to leave a like on the video. And if you're feeling a little bit extra generous and want to take that support to the next level, you can also become a patron at patreon.com/rarecandytcg or pick up some merch at rarecandytcg.com. Links to everything will be down below in the description. But as always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.